In today's video, we're going to go over the PvP season of TFS, the Freak Show in Season T1, which has just ended. And we're going to talk about, of course, the fact that we lost, as well as what happened, some of the issues with the map, our enemies, and things like that. So I'm just going to recap a bit of everything that has happened to me and to the server and to the Alliance. So the first thing to talk about is obviously who was versus who. Now, it is a bit complex, but obviously the majority of the alliances on the servers were not massive war alliances. It was really just TFS and EXG versus EIS and BXS. Now, EXG had multiple sub-alliances, and so does EIS and BXS. But just for those who are curious to see, the top power here, it's obviously a lot of 100 million power. And, I'm 60 million power and I'm 400 something. So, I mean, the top 200 basically is all above 80 million, just to give you an idea of how big this season was. And in terms of personal merit, we have obviously Blink and Sod here, Prelude, a few big wells obviously on both sides. It was a very filled with war season, of course, but it had some downfalls with the maps, in my opinion. So this is what I'm going to talk about next here. If I zoom out here and see, of course, we are going to be Zolan. So this is where we started, EXG and TFS, while our enemy started at Sophrostia. So this is where BXS and EIS started. And then basically every other zone was empty. Like, these are all like farm alliances that have like almost no power whatsoever. This zone under here was like two of the farm alliances of EXG, and then they had their own farm alliances as well. LSK was their old farm alliance, and here KNQ, that's all their farm alliances. So the one thing I was very sad about this season is that we have 6 continents, and one of them had BXS and EIS, and one of them had TFS and EXG, and everything else was completely empty. So I find that a little bit sad. Either they should have made the capacity on the territories to be able to only hold one of our alliances at a time, so we would at least occupy 4 different regions with 4 different big alliances, but then we'd still have 2 empty ones. So I did find it pretty sad to see how many of these zones were left completely empty by the game. I do hope that in the future they fix that, because it was, obviously kind of a sad thing where all our enemies are here and all of us are here, and then we kind of like just go through the middle and start fighting around the middle, and then the rest of the map was completely nothing, weeks and weeks of nothing. But it would have been really nice if we could have like had another 1 or 2 big powerful alliances in one of these zones, so that we'd have like 2, 3, or 4 different areas of fighting instead of just 1 versus 1 way into the middle kind of thing. So this is what I think about what happened in the beginning. Now, next, the other thing is obviously how we got to Dragon. So as you can see, obviously we were in these zones, which is like Lorcan and Agoru just underneath. We came in from this gate here, and our enemies came from this gate here, because they have obviously the whole left side. And then the other alliance, EIS, came from this gate here, which we took since we took their gate from them. But they eventually came here at the beginning and then built all the way in the middle. And you can see now they don't have any more territory that goes to a gate, but they have this chunk here of territory, which there are 2 fortresses down here. So this is kind of like where EIS built, and we came from here. So of course, the biggest thing about this season, for us, at least on my perspective, was the distance from gate to dragon. Because as many of you will know by now and see by now, that the reason that we lost obviously this season so hardly is because we couldn't get into the dragon zone because of this choke point specifically. Now, you can see this choke point is a pretty amazing choke point, because the only way we enter is from here. So we have to ball up here. And then if we want to burn this or burn this, we have to go into these small chokes, because this is all dead zone here. So you have to go all here. Basically, you have like a small area, and then go here to burn this, or go here to burn this, which means you're kind of like balled up on the fort. You're still able to surround it, but every troop supporting it is balled up on top of builders. If you go further up, obviously you're kind of like in the open, where they can banana you all around and make big circles and surround you, and you can never spread out. You're always stuck in this little area or this little area here, because it's, a pretty closed up choke point. And even at the beginning, they were defending kind of like here by putting all their stuff here and preventing us from even moving, because this is another choke. So it's basically a triple choke point, and then when you get out of the choke point, it's empty land where you can super stretch yourself out. So there is almost no way of getting out of this choke point, especially because it's 200 TFS member versus 400 EIS and BXS. Or allies, EXG, while they are, still powerful and have very good players, they have barely any land here, and they can't barely put any cities. And even if they could, it's, a few dozen players at the most. So they were fighting on a different front most of the season. So the big issue here really was the time to get here. If you count from this gate all the way to this choke, and this gate all the way to this choke, versus our gate and this gate as well, I think, to the choke. Basically, it is a few flags difference. So this gate and basically like most of the northern gate have, I think, 2 or 3 flag differences in how early they can get here. So by the time that they build like this flag, I think right here, we were building this flag kind of like right here. So we needed like, you know, 1, 2, 3 more flags, and then we were here. They were basically here 2 or 3 flags before us, which means that they dropped their fortress as we were kind of like building this flag, for example. So we couldn't even destroy their fortress if we wanted to when they were building it. And by the time we reached here, their fortresses and their flags were all built and finished, and they were just a big ball of people right here. So they got here, and meanwhile we were down here, which means that there is no way we could have ever gotten to this choke early unless we had taken a completely different starting zone, but their zone had basically the fastest path to this area. Now, while I'm talking about the choke, I just want to highlight one extra thing from another season. If I look here and go look at FS, which is our allies, of course, it is where I'm from. I was in FS from the beginning. This is where I had my first 4 victories. And you can see in their Dragon Zone, now, of course, things have changed because the season's over for quite a bit. But they basically got into Dragon, and they're building up territory here. But this is all things they didn't have. They basically got into Dragon early on, faster than their enemies, just like our enemies did in TFS. And then they built up this entire area. They put a fortress down here, and then they put a fortress down here, which is the exact same choke. And they defended against 6 alliances of 200 members. FS had 1 ally, but their ally was south here. They never made it to Dragon Zone. So it was 200 FS members versus 1,200 enemies, and they successfully defended this. Basically, it's like the north is a bridge, and the east is this famous choke, and then the south is another choke that is absolutely crazy, as you also can't really do much here, because every time you get off the choke, you go into small, narrow areas. Enemies can surround you like crazy, and you're all balled up. So it's pretty self-explanatory to show how insane this Dragon Zone was, and the first ones to get there really have a huge advantage. So of course, this was what made us, in my opinion, lose. It was a bit of a downfall. We could never get here. It was way too hard. There's 400 of them. There's 200 of us. We really couldn't get here. Even with AXG helping us, they brought like a dozen people, a few dozen marches, but it's not enough to fight 2 alliances with all their cities here, refreshing instantly. And these fortresses take 4 hours to destroy. We did get this fortress down to like lower than 40% after hours and hours of fighting, but it takes too long and people don't have time to play for 7-8 hours in a row. So we could never get it to 0%. And then we got this down, I think 70-something% as well once, but you know, we just lose so many troops by getting, you know, attacked and defending and stuff. It's really, really hard to attack into this kind of defense. The defender has a huge advantage on top of outnumbering us. So we never made it through, and this is just how it is, and we could never make it. The biggest thing we were able to do is, after many days of fighting here, we went through the north and destroyed their territory, took their pass, and then came and attacked this spire, which was obviously EIS's spire. And you can see BXS even built a fort there. Their fort was in the choke earlier before. So they built a fort here. They built a lot of flags, a lot of cities, and they built a ton of like flags. As you can see here, there's so many flags here. Because we did win the spire war, of course. We did have a little bit of help from EXG, but mostly it was 1 versus 2. So TFS versus BXS and EIS, 200 versus 400. We got maybe a 50 March help from flyers. EXG sent basically 50 members with flyers to help us once during the push, and that was it. That was most of the help we got. EXXL had like 5-6 members maybe helping us in that push. In general, it was 2 versus 1, and it was a very good fight. I made an entire video about it because it was really exceptional. I think we lost 1 billion power, and they lost like 900 million power total on their alliances because of the hospital basically getting filled. So it was incredible. It was a lot of action, a lot of fighting. I recommend you go watch this video. Of course, pushing further was and a little bit too hard as a 2 versus 1 with tons of flags, uphill fortresses, and it would have taken us so long to get all the way here, and then we'd have to fight another spire and then a bridge. So it was not a strategy that was really going to go anywhere. It was really just that we could show that we could beat them 2v1 in a fight that's not a choke, and we did. Now, we couldn't beat them 2v1 all the time. They still had many places where they won and could defeat us, but it was just one good show of TFS strength. As far as EXG or allies for the rest of the season, the majority of what they did was focused down here. You can see obviously now they're here, EXG and TFS, we have this bridge, but the most of the season EXG had gone all the way down here and we're on this plateau fighting. Now the sad thing is we had no way of helping them. We had to go all the way around here. It would take a 40 minutes march just to get here to help them, other than flyers of course. So they were fighting down here and they were fighting the LSK, which was the other alliance here, which was like at 7 or 8 billion power, which is almost as strong as EXG. And then they were fighting BXS and then EIS, which now has territory here. They didn't used to be, but they were basically able to come and reinforce very easily because their cities are down here. So they eventually got pushed back. We were hoping that EXG would push the bottom and then we would push maybe the top or the side here, and they couldn't defend every side. But EXG sadly is just not able to push bottom by themselves when they're fighting BXS, EIS, and LSK. So they were not able to do that, which is kind of like what ended up happening, where we're not obviously winning in the end of the day. We didn't have any way of getting into this area. We couldn't break this choke, and the south is too far away from us. The north is too far away from them. We can't really get our allies to help. So it was all in all, I would say obviously a defeat that was based around building position where we chose the season to start. We obviously shouldn't have started here. It's obviously a terrible area to start because the passes that it has access to take longer to get to Dragon. And of course, it was just not something that worked out for us. But in any other scenario, of course, it's a good learning experience and gave us a lot of fighting. We had a lot of merit, a lot of fighting, a lot of war in general. It was a very fun season in that sense. We did a lot of fighting with all T5 mostly, a little bit of T4. And for me, myself, I started this season at around 40 million power. Now I'm at 63. I did my first 8 million merit, basically fighting as 40 million power. And then the last few million, like 3 million, I guess, were as a T5, which as a T5, I only have one march of T5, so I don't have that much T5 yet, but the research at least and everything. Now for the future, of course, I'm not going anywhere. I had a great time with TFS, and I find that it has some of the best fighters. And of course, we have another season coming out, which is going to be season B2, for which is going to be with the new marksman hero and everything. So we've already, obviously, where the migration phase is over, and we haven't moved. We're in the same place as we were, the same server, so that's pretty easy. So once all of this summary and everything is done, we'll place everybody around, and a lot of people are going to leave alliances, switch around. So it'll be interesting, and then in a few days, we'll have matchmaking and region select. So we are looking forward to whoever our new enemies will be, and the new map, which is going to be, I guess, season 2 map all over again. So if you're interested in following us again, of course, make sure to follow the channel. I will be staying with TFS and making videos about our war, guides, and stuff like that for the foreseeable future. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.